It's really nice to start with the solution end of it, because now I'm going to talk to you guys about the very depressing problem end. But I am going to end up talking about some of the solutions, some of the ways that my organization has been exploring to hold space so that we can transition away from fossil fuels and into an alternatives future.
Can you say your name and your organization?
Absolutely. So again, I'm Shana Lazaro. I'm a staff attorney with Communities for a Better Environment. We have offices here in Oakland, actually right around the corner, and in Southeast LA and Huntington Park, and we organize in low-income communities of color in the urban areas in California. We organize in Southeast LA and in Wilmington, the Ports area down in LA. And up here we organize in Contra Costa County and in East Oakland. Our lawyers on staff.
And Richmond, aren't you in Richmond?
Richmond is Contra Costa County.
Oh, that's
so we have organized for many years in Richmond, and we did organize for a couple of decades in San Francisco, and worked around the Potrero power plant for quite a while, and still provide technical assistance on that. We're something of a unique organization in that we have lawyers, community organizers, and scientists and researchers on our staff. So I have the luxury of commending to you all the advantages of community organizing. But let me start first. What I would like to talk about this evening first is talking about the health impacts that one of these supposedly clean new power plants would have if it went into your community or a low-income community of color anywhere. And then talk a little bit about the tools that communities can use to keep these new power plants from being built so that we aren't locked into this fossil-fueled future. So the most depressing part, the impacts on communities. You know, I hear all the time, these are clean, natural gas power plants. Well, they emit a whole bunch of pollutants. The pollutants that EPA refers to as criteria pollutants, small particulates, which we call PM, particulate matter, carbon monoxide, VOCs, which combined with, volatile organic compounds, which combined with oxides of nitrogen form smog, and also sulfur dioxide, or SOx. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about each one of those, what those do, and I won't smile while I'm doing it. So first, particulate matter. This is a really big one in our work in Southern California right now because that area is in serious and severe non-attainment for particulate matter. Exposure to PM is closely associated with increased hospitalization for lung and heart problems. If you plot a chart of hospital admissions for asthma attacks, and you plot on the same chart levels of particulate matter in the ambient air, you'll see that they really parallel each other. It's a very close correlation. The California Air Resources, I have all my acronyms written down here, so the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, estimated pretty recently that about 18,000 people in the state of California die every year prematurely just because they're breathing the higher levels, the excess levels of PM that are in our air. And to put that in perspective, about half as many people in LA die in car crashes every year as die just from breathing the PM that they have. And it's even worse to expose your children to particulate matter than to expose fully formed lungs and developing lungs. It can really play a strong role in reducing lung function and increasing respiratory symptoms and illness, so very bad for children. Carbon monoxide bonds with the oxygen that's in your blood, and I think we all know that you can be poisoned by carbon monoxide, you can die. Can basically suffocate, but even exposure at very low levels during pregnancy has been linked in any of the 3 trimesters, has been linked to very underweight babies being born, and if you track underweight births through their life, they suffer a lot of sort of very characteristic illnesses, diabetes, obesity, and premature death. So carbon monoxide also very bad. VOCs, volatile organic compounds, contribute to forming ground level smog, and if I'm talking too fast, slow me down. They contribute to formation of ground level ozone or smog, and I think we've all been around smoggy days. You just feel awful. That's because it really impairs your breathing and stresses your heart to be breathing smog. Those are the most common health effects that we sort of experience ourselves and know about. But one thing you might not know about is that it really affects your immune system. So the people who are breathing smog are also more likely to catch whatever is going around. They just get sick more. And oxides of nitrogen, even when they're not combined with VOCs to form smog, on their own have really serious impacts on your lungs, on your respiratory system. If you have any underlying conditions like asthma, exposure to NOx is likely to trigger it. And NOx on its own is a PM precursor. So when you have a lot of NOx going out into the air, some of that is going to turn into PM. So you're increasing your PM level and your NOx and your smog all at the same time. Finally, on our biggest culprit list is SOx, sulfur dioxide, which is also a respiratory irritant, and it can cause fluid accumulation in your lungs. And if any of you have seen, fluid accumulation and sloughing of your respiratory lining. So those are the criteria pollutants and the impacts that they have when they're being emitted from power plants into our air. These power plants are also emitting a whole host of hazardous air pollutants, or HAPs. You've probably heard most of these names: benzene, toluene, formaldehyde. You may or may not know that pH is polyaromatic hydrocarbons, and toxic metals. So it's really bad. What's coming out of those stacks is really bad. Unfortunately, the communities where these new power plants are trying to be located are often already hosting too many sources of pollutants like this. They have mobile sources that are driving through them. They have stationary sources that are just spewing out of smokestacks and fugitive emissions. One of the places where we organize in Southeast LA and also in Contra Costa, they're both really good examples of these communities that are already suffering from cumulative effects of mobile and stationary sources. So in Southeast LA, where we organize, is almost entirely people of color. They're over 90% Latino communities in Huntington Park, Maywood, Commerce, and Southgate. And these are really low-income communities where the average household income is more than $10,000 a year, less than the county average. So it's really low. By the 2000 census, between 15 and 27% of the families were living below the poverty line. Obviously, since the economic crisis, those conditions have gotten much, much worse. Half of the population in Huntington Park, where our office is either under the age of 18 or over the age of 65. So these are really sensitive, vulnerable to the kinds of increased pollution that a new power plant would impose on them. And Southeast LA has a huge number of stationary sources that are served by diesel trucks going in and out all day, all night, and diesel trains, of course, carrying freight back and forth. So CBE and its allies we fought off 2 big power plants in Southeast LA in the last decade. And our members are really hoping not to have to fight off any more for the moment. Most recently, there was a proposal for a 943 megawatt power plant in the city of Vernon that went by the moniker of Southeast Regional Energy Center, or something so benign like that. It was going to sit adjacent to the cities of Huntington Park and Maywood, and in its sort of breathing zone are just scores of sensitive receptors. Elementary schools, middle schools, Huntington Park High School, daycare centers, hospitals, recreational parks, even senior centers and nursing homes. And less than 5 years before Vernon proposed its power plant, we had fought off the Nueva Zelia plant, which was a 550 megawatt facility that was proposed for Southgate, which is also a city in Southeast LA. And I'll tell you a little bit about the strategies that worked for each of those plants.